I'm delighted to be sharing that Candace Fleming is here with us. I know that's why you're all here. She has written more than 20 books for children and young adults, including the amazing, wonderful The Family Romanov, which captivated me, also captivated the Prince Committee. They gave it an honor. And many other books. With us, we have The Curse of the Mummy, Uncovering Tutankhamun's Tomb, coming out from Scholastic Focus in September. So Candy, with that, I'm gonna flip it over to you.
Oh, great, thanks. Gosh, I'm so excited to be here this morning, you guys, and I'm so excited that I see so many of my friends that are here. And part of me is like thrilled. We're all together here in my little office in Chicago, and part of me is so not thrilled because I wish we were really together somewhere, you know, all in one room. Sorry about the tiny corner. I'm gonna apologize first. My office is a huge mess, so this is the tidiest spot that I could actually find. And I'm gonna blame Scholastic for that because I'm working on my new Scholastic book, which is due very soon. And I hope Lisa Sandell is listening because she now knows I'm really working. But I'm really excited to share with you my new book. It's out in September called The Curse of the Mummy. And this book actually began, like King Tut, it actually began in Egypt. I say that because I did a lot of research here at home with the Ashmolean Library at Oxford University, who has all those wonderful primary source materials about Howard Carter and his unpublished autobiography and all of the 3-volume set, which I now am the proud owner of, my personal 3-volume set of the opening of the tomb of King Tutankhamun. They have a lot of archival photographs, a lot of original letters and those sorts of things that we can see ourselves, that I can discover about the opening of the rediscovery of King Tut's tomb on my own. But more importantly, I knew that after I had done all that primary research, I knew that I needed to go to Egypt because I needed to see it myself. I am a firm believer that landscapes speak and households, or in this case, tombs, have memories. And so I went to Egypt, and I'm going to do a quick share here with you guys. You will not see, if you're hoping to see any pictures of Eric Bina, you will not, because he's asked me not to put himself in there. But I went to Egypt, and I needed to see and feel Egypt. Especially coming on all that I had already known about the rediscovery, about what I had learned about Tutankhamun on my own. I went to the Cairo Museum. You guys, I love the fact that I can actually show you my vacation photographs at the same time. I went to the Cairo Museum. Tut's tomb's artifacts were still there. They hadn't been moved to the new Gem Museum, which is still not open. But here on that second floor, it's hot, it's dusty. The windows are open. I mean, it's amazing how they keep these artifacts. But here's the thing. As I walked around all of these sort of mind-boggling, it was just, it was extraordinary treasures that we had found in that tomb. I kept getting this sense of discomfort. I kept getting this sense of poignancy, and I didn't know how to describe that. I even quite sure how to describe it now, but I couldn't pinpoint it at the time. I would come home and I would write in my journal about how disturbed I was, but I couldn't figure out what that disruption was. I couldn't figure out what it was that was nagging at me. For whatever reason, I'm not moving. Come on. Of course, I'm stuck. Doesn't that figure? Oh, of course. And now we've gone back. This is my Egyptologist. Obviously, it's moving much slower than I am. This is our Egyptologist. His name is Dr. Issam Hamed. He was at the Cairo Museum, or Cairo American Museum in Cairo. And he taught me a lot. You just saw that picture fly by of me learning hieroglyphs. He actually taught me how to read a little bit of hieroglyphs. I got good enough to discover things like curses and things on my own. But he also would tell me about what was beneath my feet, not artifacts that I had found at a museum, but what was actually beneath my feet that you would walk on in Egypt. And all that astrakhan from 4,000 years of people bringing clay pots of honey and oil and milk and water to the gods. And you would actually walk across it. And he would pick it up. And you can see the pieces here. He would pick it up and he would explain to me and what it was that he was looking at. And again, I'm going to say I had that real feeling of discomfort. I wasn't sure about walking through. In fact, they would encourage you to take a piece. You could take a piece home. Nobody cared. And I'm thinking, no, I cannot take a piece of that home. I care. But again, that feeling of what is really going on. I have no idea why this is. You guys, why is my technology misbehaving like this? I may actually dump it if I could escape from it. Oh, there we go. Okay, so still, so I went into a lot of tombs. I was like, I'm not doing this really fast now. And then we actually went to the Valley of the Kings. And there's where I actually went to Tut's tomb. And I went, of course, with Dr. Hamed. And I went deep inside that tomb and I got to see all of those things in that tomb. The walls, those beautiful walls, that rose-colored sarcophagus that still remains there. It's the only thing that remains except for Tut himself, Tutankhamun. And here's where things really changed for me. I had gone through Egypt. I had discovered its wonders. I had visited a man whose face flashed by when my slideshow did. You saw me standing, if you saw it, I was standing with a man named Mr. Bedawi, who actually lives outside on the outskirts of the Valley of the Kings. And he has a little shop. It's actually a museum. And he talked about the treasures that were beneath his feet, the treasures that were in his backyard, the treasures that he actually dug up or discovered simply putting in a garden, discovered himself, that he put onto his own shelves there in this amazing little museum that he actually owned. And then I got to Tutankhamun, and it's a picture that is not in the book. It's an intentional picture. You will not see Tutankhamun. You'll see photographs taken, archival photographs taken during the autopsy, but you will not see a picture like this. And this is intentional. And I probably will not show it to kids when I talk about this book with them, because this is this moment for me. Every once in a while in research, this thing happens to me. I have this moment where everything I think I know about the story that I'm going to tell changes. And this is what happened when I stood there and I met Tutankhamun face to face. He and I came face to face after a year of research, after reading all about him, after being here in his very tomb and looking at those things that had been made in his honor on the walls. But I stood there and I looked at him and I realized suddenly that I was unbelievably uncomfortable because of a particular reason. This is a boy that actually lived. These are his mortal remains. He was actually buried in a way that was deeply symbolic and deeply religious and deeply important to him. And later, and it's a body that we weren't meant to see. No one was ever supposed to see it again. And yet there it is, every day on display. Thousands of people walk through the tomb and we look upon him. And I kept thinking to myself, this is what's made me uncomfortable. All of it sort of coalesced. The idea that we are every day looking at these mortal remains of this man. Generations came by, later generations came by, actually unwrapped him and rummaged through his bandages, taking out all those religious artifacts that had been so carefully placed, it's a sacrilege, right? We had taken all of those things so prepared for his afterlife, so necessary, he believed, for the rest of for his immortal life. And we've taken them all, we've put them in a museum, and we all stare at them. And we've been digging around for generations in the dirt of Egypt, Mr. Bedowi's world, Mr. Bedowi's land, my friend Sam Hassam's land. All of it sort of coalesced for me. And I realized that I had to go home and tell a different sort of story. Here's Dr. Bedowi, or Mr. Bedowi, by the way, in his wonderful shop. He gave me a scarab ring. You guys, it's a real scarab. I should have worn it. He gave me a scarab ring. And he has 4 wives, but I'm now beginning to wonder if I might be his 5th, but but I came home and I realized that what I needed to do was write a different sort of story. You guys have heard me talk about this before. It's called my vital idea. And what happens, what I mean by that is I do a lot of research. And what I'm doing is gathering a story, but I'm never sure what that story actually is going to be about. I'm still gathering the facts. But here's the deal. Until I know what the vital idea is, I can't really write my book. And what I mean by vital idea is, what is it that I have to say to readers of the 21st century with this piece of history? I'm not simply writing a piece of history because I want to chronicle a story for them so that they can use it as a report. I have something I want to say about how we live in the 21st century that I want to say through this piece of history. And so what I realized was that there were a couple of stories here that needed for children of the 21st century to hear that they haven't heard before. And this is what I love about history. History is not a settled scholarship, right? It's reconsidered, it's reinterpreted. Every generation looks at history with new eyes, particularly now as we're trying to return all those marginalized voices that have been overlooked to our collective historical memory. We need to actually take a look at those stories that we do know and ask if we've told them the right way for the 21st century. And so for the very first time, I decided to tell the story of Tutankhamun and the rediscovery, because Carter didn't discover that tomb, ancient robbers actually did first. But I wanted to tell this story in a new way and add some elements that we have not seen before, but are important to the story that I would not have thought about or even discovered if I hadn't visited Egypt. And those things are colonialism. What are all these white European Americans doing, rich men doing in Egypt, digging around in Egypt's soil and removing its treasures to places like the British Museum? Do they still belong there? Is it time for us to return them? What about Tut? He's given everything. Literally, he has given everything for science and knowledge, for our knowledge and for science. So perhaps it's time that we acknowledge that. And while we can't change the past, we can at least pause, readers can, and thank him for that sacrifice, that we've learned so much about Egypt from him. And then the third thing, of course, is the curse, because it is called the Curse of the Mummy. And why include the curse? Well, it's simply fun. It will get kids to come in and read it. I mean, look at the cover, right? Who doesn't want to read that? But additionally, it's a real story about fake news. It has a lot to tell us about the 21st century. It has a lot to tell us about fake news in the idea of where did that curse idea come from? Where did it begin? Who started it? How did it grow? Why do we still believe it today? Right? I read about it in the Guardian the other day. I mean, there was a show at the Saatchi Gallery in London, and somebody said, "Oh, I think I went to the Saatchi Gallery, and since then I've had all this bad luck. It must be the curse of the mummy." What else could it be? So there's that element as well within the curse of the mummy. There's that element of what else could that curse be? Where did it begin? It's a little fake news, right? But what else could it be? What scientific reasons might be behind that curse? And what is a curse really, right? And I wanted to do all of that and still have this amazing adventure story, edge of your seat sort of romp. And so I came home from Egypt with all these new ideas, with this vital idea about what it was I was really going to write. And I began. I wanted to show you guys my draft, and then I promise I'll stop talking. But I have to show you my draft. I've been showing this drafts to kids for the last year now, and they're amazed. So I'm going to try to amaze you. I'm going to see if I can amaze Bina. But here's my draft. Some of you people who know me know that I write everything by hand first. And because I am writing today, everything with a big pen and a wide line loose leaf paper, right? Everything. Picture books, novels, big pieces of nonfiction. So here is my Curse of the Mummy, my first draft. Here it is, The Curse of the Mummy. I love to show kids. Why do I write it this way? Because it's not precious. I don't feel like it's that important. I can crunch up papers, throw it to the dog. I can slide pieces of paper off, throw it into the trash. I can scratch things out and write in the margins. And for me, it makes me feel loose. It makes me feel like I'm playing, and it makes me feel like I'm discovering. And writing really is, for me, a discovering process. And I'll tell you what else I love is, at the end of the day, big pens are so cheap. I love the smell of them. But when I get done, I can go out and show to my family. I'll have ink all over my hand right here, because I'm right-handed, so it goes across. I'll have ink all over my hands. I can say to people, look, I wrote today. So that's sort of the very beginnings of The Curse of the Mummy. And so I'm going to actually stop, and I'm going to turn, because I know our time is very short, and I'm going to turn and I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions for me about the book.
That was amazing. Candace, thank you so much.
Sorry about the technology glitch.
No, this is the challenge and the beauty of us being live together. So folks, ask your questions in the chat. I can sort of go through. I thank you so much, everybody, for engaging so much in this. I loved. Jennifer was saying that you came here to listen and you're taking endless notes. Me too, honestly.
Good. I'm so glad. Yeah, that, and I always think it's like, I have this philosophy, of this writer's purpose, and I don't mean like author's purpose for a piece of writing. That's different. But I have this purpose for myself as a writer, particularly when I think about nonfiction. And I really think that the purpose of nonfiction in the 21st century, kids have so many facts to hand, right? Doesn't take much to look something up. So they have a lot of facts to hand, but this is what they don't have, is context. What do those facts actually mean? What story do I need from a true story that somehow I learned something from, right? Because we don't know how to live in the present if we don't tell our stories from the past. So my job is to put those facts into context. And that's why you can keep telling an old story, right? When we think we know that history, we think we know, because every generation tells their stories differently, right?
That's absolutely true. And I think that's something that that we love taking to young readers is the idea that like they are a contributing living part of this. So I think that's something you believe too. But what I know you do a lot of school visits. Is there any message that you want to share, or anything that you want to provide to readers, like with the experience of reading this book? Any big takeaways?
If they were reading this book?
Yeah. Or from your author presentation, anything about the research process?
Yeah, I always talk to them about curiosity. I really think it's important. And this idea that we should ask our own questions, the questions that we're curious about, not necessarily what our teacher wants us to be curious about, but what we're curious about. Research is, oftentimes we give them a research project and we act like it's a search project. Find the day somebody was born, the day they died, and the major accomplishments in between. Well, When I work with kids, I'll actually give them those dates because those are easily found. That's just a search project. But research means questioning, asking what you're interested in, finding the answer. And then invariably what happens is it sparks another question and you follow to the next question, you ask another question, you follow, and it's a trail. You find an answer, you find another question, you find an answer, you find another question. And that's what I love about research. It's detective work. It really is.
Absolutely. A lot of key points from journalism and that kind of thing too. A question from Vina came in. At what point do you transfer the handwritten information into the computer document that becomes your draft? I think that doing it old school makes you pay more attention. You can't word search through your notes.
It is, you have to pay closer attention. And it's probably part of the reason I do it too. So after this first draft, then I will type it in, literally type it in. And as I do, I'll make changes. So it's really a second revision. Also, my first draft, I actually call it, I have a name for it that I don't share with kids because I tried once and sixth graders turned it into something it didn't mean. But let me find a page. I call it dumping down. And here's the deal. I'm writing narrative nonfiction. So I'm trying to write a story. So I have a flow and I have a pace and I have a place where I know that things are going to where I'm going to change, I'm going to have a new chapter and there is a narrative arc to it. And so that's what I'm going for the very first time. And so I leave huge blanks. I'm trying to find a page. I use huge blanks in my manuscripts that have like TK on them. I know I need a quote there. I know there's a date there. I know there's a specific number of wooden paddles that they found in the tomb, but I can't recall that. That's in my notes, but I don't care about that right now because I can put that back in, right? But what I'm really looking for is that story's heartbeat, and that's why I write it longhand. I'm just going with my flow, so to speak. So I really just call it dumping down. When I'm ready to write, when I know the vital idea, the story starts to whisper, which sounds weird, but true. That's how I write it. But yeah.
That's great. I have a question coming in from Rebecca. She was asking, is there a book that's your favorite that you've written? And I know that that's a like favorite child kind of question. So maybe you can share like a favorite moment of research or, a favorite uncovering in one of your books.
I have a favorite uncovering. The standing in front of Tut really was Tutankhamun. I refuse to call him Tut, so I can't believe I just did. But Tutankhamun, standing there looking at him, I had not expected, I actually cried. And I was sort of embarrassed because there were a lot of other people in that tomb and they're looking at me. And I cried for, like I said, and I couldn't quite figure out what the problem was it because I was so moved that I'd spent so much time and it was something I've always been interested in. Was I crying because there he was, those are his remains and, he's a real person, and I couldn't quite figure it out. It was a real jumbled mess. And I had to come home. And like I said, I always have my journal. And so I had to work it out on the pages of my journal for quite a while. And I realized that what it was that really was the moment when it struck me that this is a book about so much more than Lord Carnarvon and Howard Carter, right? It's about Egyptian independence and colonial. It's just about a lot of things. So.
That's such a great revelation moment. I want to note that we have about 1 minute left. We can go a little bit over and answer questions. Candy, if you're okay with that.
Okay, I'm good with it. Hi, Joan. Right. It's good to see you up there in the corner.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question that came in from Amy. Could you talk about your process? Does it start with an idea or topic that you're interested in, and then you do the research? What sparks your idea?
Sure. The ideas are always things that I'm fascinated with, that I'm curious about, that I know I'm going to want to spend a lot of time with, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, depending on what I'm writing. Charles Lindbergh. So it has to be something that I'm absolutely enamored with. I know that I'm going to want to spend a lot of time with, that I have a lot of questions about myself. I also will choose that topic a little bit carefully too, because I will ask myself, what is the purpose? Again, that vital idea. Why bother to tell this piece of history to kids of the 21st century? All right, so once I choose a topic, then I go and I do my research, and I basically have 4 paths. The first is primary source material. So I always go to the primary sources first. Then I go to secondary sources, but I do them pretty minimally. Usually that's to provide context for me. Right now I'm working on something that takes place during World War II, and I'm reading a great secondary book about the Battle of the North Atlantic, right? So that's sort of what I use that secondary sources for. And I read them late because I don't want somebody else's, another historian's viewpoint of an event to sort of taint mine. I want to figure it out on my own. My third is experts. I always use experts. I've never had an expert that didn't happily help me. And usually they go far and above what I've asked, and I rely on them a lot. And then the fourth, of course, is travel. I will always travel if I can, because travel always makes a difference to me, to see it, feel it, know it. But I do that late. And then after I've gathered all that information, then again, begin to think about what it is I really want to say. So once I figure out, based on all that research, what my vital idea is, that's when my research really goes, that's when it really begins, because then I go back and look for information specific to that vital idea, so that when I write, I pretty much know where I'm going, right? I really pretty much know which material is going to make it into the book and which is not. Vital idea is for me, it's about the most important part of the process, but it comes late. It has to be discovered, so to speak.
I love that concept of the vital idea and how we can use that to spark curiosity in kids. Somebody was asking about how Barb said that she worried that there's so much less opportunity to examine books like this in classrooms and that social studies are neglected, and asking about how we can address that in schools. I know that I don't have the answer. I don't think Candy has the answer either. But do you have any thoughts on that, Candy?
I don't. I wish I had the answer. Here's my answer to it. And this is, like, again, another one of those that I talk about what my purpose as a writer is. The reason my answer to that is, okay, because you guys don't have the time in class, so we're not paying as close to social studies as we should, and we really should, history. This is why I'm writing books, I think, in this way. I'm writing them in as narrative a form as we possibly can. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I am a narrative writer, right? So I naturally like stories. So I've been writing in ways that kids will come to this book the way they would a novel. Even the fact that this is such a beautiful cover that pulls them in. But look at its trim size. It's a novel size. It's not oversized. It doesn't have a lot of sidebars. It doesn't have sidebars. Matter of fact, it has different colored pages for the curse stories that are interspersed through the narrative. But why I'm reading that, why I'm writing in that way, is I want kids to come to it and have the same experience they do when they read a novel. So they've experienced it in their head. They can see it. If I write it as narratively with description and dialogue, or whiff of dialogue, as one of my editor calls it, it feels like a novel. It reads like a novel, and they experience it imaginatively in their head, right? The way we do a novel. And what my goal, I guess, is that if they start to read this stuff, then they've got some social studies, then they've learned some history. I've drawn them in, you know. And part of the reason we called it The Curse of the Mummy, yes, the story is the curse, but you know what that's about. It's about teasing them in so that they read it, and then, you know what, they discover a little broccoli underneath all that really good stuff, that fun, imaginative mummies, curses, buried treasure sort of thing. There's a little bit of broccoli in there, and that's good for them, and maybe they won't notice.
I think that's excellent, and maybe that broccoli will spark their own curiosity and research and process. Thank you so much. We're gonna close up here. So any final words that you want to share?
I just want to say thanks for everybody for stopping in this early morning. I hope you brought your coffee, and write me if you have questions. You know where to find me. I have a website with a email, and feel free to use it. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to know what your students think about the book when they see it. It'd be great.
Thank you so much, Candy. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you throughout the rest of the day.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.